I never thought draining a pool could be a federal offense. Apparently, my neighbor, the president of the HOA, did. It all started with a hum, a low, consistent drone from the pump in my backyard, a sound I had come to associate with the peace of a summer afternoon. The pool had reached a critical level of chemical imbalance, and a full drain and scrub was the only sane option. I'd checked the HOA bylaws, reread the city ordinances, and even consulted a pool specialist. Everything was above board. The water, a slightly chlorinated but non-toxic deluge, was being funneled neatly into a temporary holding tank I'd rented, which would then be properly disposed of. It was a tedious process, but a necessary one. So when I heard a shriek that could shatter glass, I just sighed, a long, weary exhalation that felt heavy in my chest. Here we go, I mumbled to myself. What in the Sam Hill do you think you're doing? The voice was a familiar, piercing soprano, the kind that could curdle milk. It belonged to Mrs. Eleanor Vance, our neighborhood's self-appointed queen, a woman who treated the HOA rulebook like a personal holy scripture. She was stomping across my perfectly green lawn, her face a fiery red, her hands chopping the air as if trying to swat away an invisible swarm of insects. Do you have any idea what kind of damage that toxic chemical sludge is doing to the ecosystem? To the children, to my petunias? I stood there, the sun warm on my shoulders, and just blinked at her. Eleanor, it's just pool water. It's not toxic. It's going into a tank. I gestured to the large, unassuming white container sitting on my driveway. Lies, she screeched, her voice cracking. That's a lie. You're contaminating the neighborhood. You're killing the plants. I saw a squirrel just now, a limping squirrel. Do you think that's a coincidence? Mr. Miller, do you? I took a deep breath, the smell of fresh cut grass and her cheap perfume filling my nose. This was a classic Eleanor move. Find a minor infraction, inflate it into a catastrophe, and then weaponize it with a personal anecdote about a suffering creature. It was her signature. The one time a branch fell from a tree in a storm, she'd insisted it was because the tree was depressed. I had a feeling the squirrel was just fine. But then, the twist, she pulled out her phone, her thumb mashing at the screen with frantic, determined energy. I am calling the authorities, she announced with a triumphant smirk. This is a public health emergency. This is a crime. You are draining a pool without a permit, and I am going to see you hauled away in cuffs. I almost laughed. I really did. I had all the permits. I had all the documentation. I had called the city, the county, and the state's Department of Environmental Quality. This was not a crime. This was a Tuesday. But before I could even open my mouth to tell her that, she was already shouting into the phone. 911. Yes, I'd like to report a crime in progress. A man is willfully and maliciously polluting our community. He's draining his pool directly into the street, and it's a hazardous chemical spill. He's a menace. My heart hammered a little faster, a low from against my ribs. A 911 call for this? For a pool drain. The absurdity of it was staggering. It wasn't just a simple report to the HOA anymore. This was a formal accusation to law enforcement. My neighbors, hearing the commotion, started to emerge from their homes, peeking from behind their curtains and standing on their porches, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. The whispers started to ripple through the air, a soft, buzzing sound that carried on the breeze. The police arrived faster than I expected. 2 patrol cars pulling up to the curb with their lights flashing, a silent, swirling dance of red and blue on my lawn. Officer Thompson and Officer Diaz, 2 men I had seen before at community events, stepped out, their expressions calm and professional. They were used to Eleanor, everyone was. Ma'am, what's the emergency? Thompson asked, his voice a low, soothing baritone. Eleanor, however, was having none of it. She launched into a passionate, dramatic retelling of my supposed crimes, her voice rising in pitch with every word. He's a polluter, he's poisoning our pets, he's destroying our property values. Look at that water. Officer, it's practically glowing with toxicity. She pointed a trembling finger at the hose, which was now quietly, efficiently, pumping water into the tank. Thompson and Diaz exchanged a look that spoke volumes. They were tired, so tired. Thompson turned to me. Sir, can you explain what's going on? I took a deep breath. I'm draining my pool, officer. It's been properly permitted, and the water is being contained in this tank for removal. I have all the paperwork right here. I walked over to the table I had set up and handed him a folder. As Thompson flipped through the documents, his face a study in poker-faced stoicism, Eleanor's panic started to set in. Her confident smirk began to waver. her frantic energy replaced by a kind of twitchy anxiety. She started to ramble, her accusations becoming more and more outlandish. He's trying to frame me. He's part of a conspiracy. The pool company, they're in on it. Then, the true core of the issue finally surfaced. Officer Diaz, a sharp, observant man, stepped forward. Ma'am, we have the permits right here. It looks like everything is in order. No nitrogen monoxide. It isn't, she wailed, her hands flying to her temples. He's doing it just to spite me. I told him the rule about the pool draining times. Ah, there it was, the rule. A rule she had invented herself last week and posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, but had never actually filed with the HOA board. A rule that, in her mind, was an ironclad law. What rule is that, ma'am? Diaz asked, his tone still professional, but now with a subtle edge of suspicion. The no draining on a Tuesday rule, she stammered, her voice thin. It's a new bylaw. It's for water conservation. Yes, water conservation. A small wave of laughter rippled through the gathered neighbors. A few of them had been at the last HOA meeting, where Eleanor had tried to pass a similar motion, and it had been soundly defeated. The embarrassment was a physical thing, a palpable heat radiating from her, but the real coup de grace came from a surprising new character, Ms. Ramirez, a sweet, elderly woman who had lived across the street for decades, a person so quiet you could forget she was there. She was hobbling slowly over, using her cane for support, a determined glint in her eyes. Eleanor, she said, her voice soft but clear, carrying in the tense silence. The reason my husband and I voted against that no draining on a Tuesday rule is because you insisted we had to put a birdbath in every yard. You said we were killing the local sparrows. Eleanor's face drained of all color. The blood had rushed from her face, leaving her a pale, ghostly white. She opened her mouth to protest, but Ms. Ramirez wasn't finished, and the old woman continued. You insisted the reason the leaves were falling early this year was because Mr. Miller's lawnmower was too loud, and it was causing the trees to suffer from anxiety. You fined me, Eleanor, $100 for unauthorized leaf damage. Do you remember that? A collective gasp went through the crowd. This was news to everyone. Eleanor's abuse of power had gone far beyond simply shouting at people. She was fining them for ludicrous reasons, with no authority. The officers, sensing a deeper issue, looked at Eleanor with a new, much more serious expression. Thompson put his notepad back in his pocket. Ma'am, he said, his voice now colder, falsely reporting an emergency is a serious offense, and misrepresenting HOA bylaws to levy fines against your neighbors. That's a whole other ballgame. The words hit her like a physical blow. The air rushed out of her, and her hands dropped to her sides. The grandiosity was gone, replaced by a desperate, panicked whimper. She was no longer a queen. She was a bully who had been called out, her flimsy kingdom of lies crumbling around her. She tried to stammer a defense, her words coming out as choked, broken sounds. I was just protecting the community. Protecting from what, ma'am? Officer Diaz asked, a hint of steel in his voice. From a limping squirrel? Or from the fact that you can't stand to see anyone do anything without your permission? It was a rhetorical question, of course. The answer was etched on her face, a roadmap of bitterness and control. The neighbors, emboldened by Ms. Ramirez, started to speak up, a chorus of hushed voices sharing their own Eleanor's storiest time she fined a kid for having a basketball hoop that was too orange, the time she demanded a neighbor repaint his front door because the shade of blue was disruptive to the neighborhood aesthetic. The spectacle was complete. Eleanor, seeing the crowd turn against her, seeing her authority evaporate in a puff of pool water steam, did what any true Karen would do. She collapsed, not in a fainting spell, but in a full-blown, tear-streaked public meltdown. She sank to the grass, her shoulders shaking, her sobs echoing across the quiet street. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The officers wrote her a citation for the false 911 report and then calmly suggested, I might want to bring my concerns about her to the next HOA meeting. With the documentation I had, I smiled. Oh, I would. In the end, it wasn't about a pool. It wasn't about a fine, or a squirrel, or a color of a door. It was about a person who had confused power with authority, and control with community. It was a perfect, beautiful moment of justice, a moment where a community, tired of being walked on, finally stood up together. The pool was drained, the water was contained, and the neighborhood felt lighter, as if a great, oppressive weight had been lifted.